Summer is here. At Orderly Meds, we know this time is a reminder that life is full of new beginnings. Whether you're celebrating the nice weather, starting a new chapter, planning a vacation, or simply looking ahead to what's next, this season can be the perfect time to invest in yourself and your health. If you've struggled with weight loss and are curious about GLP-1 medications, Orderly Meds can help you learn about your options. Through a simple virtual process, you can connect with licensed medical professionals who can determine whether treatment may be appropriate for you. Getting started is fast, convenient, and happens online from the comfort of home. This summer, consider a new approach to feeling your best. Visit orderlymeds.com/podcast to learn more. That's orderlymeds.com/podcast. orderlymeds.com/podcast. Because every new season is an opportunity to take the next step forward. Compounded medications are not FDA approved. Eligibility required and determined by a licensed provider. Individual results may vary. See website for details.
Get your passports ready because we're going international for this episode. Part 2.
We're getting depressed for a second.
I was going to say, if you weren't depressed enough by part 1, it's about to get even more depressing. We're taking our depression all over the world.
And it's...
Or at least to Europe. No, technically kind of all over the world, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. No, we visit up north to our friends to the north, Canada. We go to our friends in the deep south today, down in Australia.
Far East.
Far East.
Everyone's feeling this shit.
Well, and that's just to drive home a point before we even get into the episode. That's what the Great Depression in the United States did to the world. This was how far in advance our world economy had grown to the point of less than, this was the 1930s, so less than 200 years ago, we were just firing cannons off of boats at each other and fighting for our revolution. And now we've become such a superpower in the world that a Great Depression in our country has basically affected the world.
I know this is putting you on the spot, but if we can make OJ responsible for the Kardashians, then what responsibility do we have for Hitler?
More than I'd like to admit.
Yeah. And not like specifically Hitler, but for creating the environment in which someone like that is able to gather the type of control and go on to do what he did. And that's going to kind of be the focal point on this is going to be Europe and what the climate is in Europe and what the Great Depression does as far as creating this just domino effect of countries turning internal to only look after themselves and to try to focus not on what other countries are doing or keeping watch on other countries that need to be watched after World War I, but then not having the ability. We talk about this during so many World War II episodes. It's like, how the fuck you have France, you have Great Britain, which is on its own island, so it doesn't have a presence on the mainland, but all these other countries that just got steamrolled. And there's a good chunk of that that's due to the advancement of the German military and everything and the surprise factor. But part of that is also in the complete unpreparedness of these other countries, due in a large part to the simple fact that they cannot afford to build up their defenses because of the effects of the Great Depression.
I can't even think of the amount of episodes that we've talked about this. How did the rest of Europe let Germany build up such a military force? We hit them with the Treaty of Versailles. There were restrictions on them left and right. Mm-hmm. How in the world did everybody turn a blind eye to Germany becoming this powerhouse?
Yeah.
And now we get a better, more clear answer because the 1930s for a lot of these superpowers in Europe weren't good. They were so busy looking inward that they weren't focused on making sure that Germany was in compliance with military buildup.
And they couldn't afford to, because had they turned that attention outward or tried to do any type of military buildup, the citizenry, which is suffering because of the Great Depression, is going to instantly get rid of them, or they're going to go ahead and riot. I don't think we need to do a ton of lead up into this one because it's part 2, but if you're one of those weirdos that start shit on a part 2, what's wrong? Go back to part 1.
No, I like it.
You freak. No, just kidding. But anyway, if you are here, freak or not, go to patreon.com/historicallyhigh, get signed up for your bonus content.
Ratings, 5 stars if you can spare them. Let's keep that number pumping. Reviews, we love hearing what you guys think about this stuff. It's always pleasant when we throw a little bit of a curveball out. I know that there was maybe a little bit of trepidation throwing Disneyland in directly after Catherine the Great and her crazy Russian escapades going to the Mouse and Walt Disney.
Yeah, but they're great in their own ways.
That's why I love doing this, because we can switch gears to something that's completely different and still enjoy the research just that much. And from everything that we've seen, the reviews have been fantastic on that. So thank you for writing those reviews. Keep subscribing. Our subscriber numbers are just nice across the board, and we love to see them rise.
That's Professor Adam. I'm Professor Chris. Let's get depressed again.
I'm ready to be sad again.
I'm ready to be hurt again. All right, so just a little refresher, because, for some of you, it's been a week since our last episode. European agricultural production collapsed because of World War I. Millions of farmers sent to the front lines, so the United States picked up the slack. That, in turn, led to the recovery in Europe, in which case America totally shot the moon. We way overextended ourselves. Great Depression happens, and the war itself kind of shatters European countries and leaves them heavily indebted to the United States. In pretty much all aspects of any conflict in modern history, we have gotten the sweet end of the deal just simply because we are geographically isolated from who we've been fighting against. We don't have to repair any of our cities. In fact, we build so much new shit when war pops off just so we have the capability of rebuilding all the other shit that gets destroyed. So European countries are taking out loans from American banks and everything like that, and to pay off the $33 billion in wartime loans that is being ordered by the Treaty of Versailles, which the Weimar Republic, that is ruling Germany at this point, or running Germany at this point, has to pay as far as reparations to France and Great Britain. That completely financially breaks them. They have to borrow so much from the United States just to turn around and provide it to France and Great Britain, who then in turn turn around with payoffs from Lend-Lease and all of that stuff to paying the United States back, or banks in the United States. So it creates this insanely fragile loop of international cash where at any point, if that money stops flowing into Germany because of, financial complications within the United States, they're kind of all fucked, because France and Britain are also banking on this money coming in to help the recovery of their countries. So it's just this game of super dangerous hot potato involving three major players.
The right hand of the U.S. hands the money to Germany. Germany hands the money over to France and Britain, and then the left hand of the United States receives the money from France and Britain.
Yeah, and the moment that the American lending stopped, the whole global system is just completely fucked. So long before the actual crash itself in 1929, the world's farmer itself were already feeling the depression. So European farms being completely destroyed, not just farmers being killed, but just the destruction of a lot of land.
I didn't even think about that part.
Yeah, exactly. Not just the people that were running it, the land itself to actually do that on. That again led to production in the United States, Canada, and also Argentina being expanded so they could feed the world itself. And in the 1920s, as the European farms recovered, suddenly Europe was like, we don't have to bring in so much shit from outside, but it's still, we could still support ourselves at this point. So wheat, cotton, and sugar just completely plummet.
And for the industry in the United States that we don't have, the countries in Europe are benefiting from their exports coming over. So even though we are kind of dancing around being in a recession and nobody wants to say the R word, nobody wants to admit what's going on, we're still spending money importing things in. This is free trade. There's no tariffs at this point in time. Europe is starting to gain a little bit of traction after the war, and for a couple of years after World War I, things are on a rebound. They're on a surge.
It feels like they're on, but like all isolationist style. Like it's not European countries like working together. It's everybody looking out for themselves to trying to rebuild themselves back up. Because who's going to be, every war feels like there has to be that buildup to see who's going to take the power back and be the new like dominant superpower. So there's really just a lot of nationalism. And then when these tariffs are put out, what was it, the Holly Smoot tariffs? That just, again, the tariffs that come right back the other direction, this just pretty much solidifies this fact that people need to look out for their own countries. Backfires heavily, kills international trade because they're not just able to sell their goods easily to the United States or abroad, and it creates this like stagnant global market. Falling into the same trap that a lot of people did in the United States, by 1928, the American stock market, being the preeminent, stock market on the planet at that point, was booming so fast that global investors were looking at it being like, we need to be dumping our money into that as well.
Back to a previous episode, this is the same stock market that the Dutch put in, right?
I believe it is. They always get their revenge. Well, here's what's crazy too, is American investors who were putting money into like Europe for reconstruction, everything like that, also saw the stock market. It's that meme where the guy's walking with his girlfriend, he's looking back, and the girlfriend is European reconstruction. The girl walking the other direction is the New York Stock Exchange, and it's the guy looking back, and American investors being like, we're not going to be making our money as quickly on this whole reconstruction. Philanthropy doesn't really pay the bills a lot.
No,
so
not at all.
We're going to dump all of this investor money into Wall Street. So foreign investors also pull their money out of their own local economies to gamble on the American stocks, weaken it even more. And that sudden drain of capital basically leaves European economies super fragile and entirely defenseless. So when the market finally does break in October of 29, it just takes a light little gust to knock down the house of sticks or the house of cards, however you want to say it.
Everything was so tentative in Europe. It was, and again, it gets back to your point in the beginning. We did we did the theme music. Whoa.
Yeah, we did.
Shit, it's gone.
Great Britain. Banana.
Gone.
The Teachings of Billy Blanks. You just pulled a Chris.
Shit.
I'm the one that usually does that.
Yeah.
You want me to try to have you walk it back? We were talking about
Let's pop it into neutral and see if we can roll start this.
Let's see. Okay, American investors, foreign investors putting money into the stock market instead of investing in reconstruction because it maybe wasn't as good of an immediate investment. Does that do anything for you? Is that tickling your taint at all?
Yeah, we'll start it down a different path here. You can see how that's an attractive market because if you are in Great Britain and you're in the middle of reconstruction and you aren't able to put money into your own economy and get anything out of it, if there's this pretty girl sitting over in the United States and she's waving to you and she's pulling up her skirt and showing you all the money that you can be making.
She's not wearing panties. At this point, the stock market is not wearing underwear.
You're going to be less inclined to invest your own British money into a recovery effort.
I like how you phrase that. You can't put your money into your local economy and not get anything out of it. You could definitely put it into your local economy for the reconstruction, but yeah, again, you're looking over that New York Stock Exchange. She's slutty. She's fast.
Mm-hmm. You're trying to get back to zero in your own country while there's tens over there sitting on the other coast. And so you can understand the allure that these European countries had for the stock market.
It's not the countries. It's the people with a lot of money in those countries.
Yeah, and it goes to show that our world economy had just grown to the point where everything was already so intertwined before World War II.
So how we're going to break this down is we're basically going to go country by country. And then it's all going to kind of lead up to let you know what the status of each country it is, or kind of how or why they may have reacted to Germany's activities during that time frame. So we start with Great Britain, right?
Yeah, the United Kingdom, also referred to the Great Depression as the Great Slump, which feels so English to me that we talk about it as depression, but the English are just like, yeah, it's a slump.
It doesn't sound as bad when it's slump.
Well, this is also the difference between a country that's been a country since 1776.
True.
And a country that has been a country for a millennia.
Yeah.
At this point in time, we're sitting over there all depressed because we're like, we can't believe this is happening. And Britain's like, we fought 100 years war against France. This is a slump. Let's relax on the naming a little bit. We're not depressed yet. We still got the Battle of Britain coming. We'll talk about depression then when they're dropping bombs down the down into the tubes. The effects
Try getting jerked off under the table.
The effects from World War I were still showing in the UK for a very long time. Economic output had fallen by 25% between 1918 and 1921. This is the point in time when recovery should be happening, when they're getting a boom. 1918 to 1921, economic output's falling.
Well, yeah, man, they're a massive global exporter, so they get devastated when this worldwide trade falls by half as a result of these tariffs, and everyone then throwing it's just fucking tariff slap fight. And so heavy manufacturing mining sectors in northern England, Scotland, and I think Wales suffered huge unemployment because nothing was going out because there were no buyers. And then British banks had heavily financed collapsing German and Austrian banks and everything. And again, all of this is being done also kind of in work with the gold standard because all these different countries have different currencies and different rates of exchange and all this kind of stuff. And they're trying to figure this out in a post-war reconstruction environment.
And there's the creativity that we're going to talk about with kind of playing with fixing currency and gold standards and all this kind of stuff. It's very interesting because we talked about in the first episode about FDR fixing the price of gold after they had already hoarded all the gold, that they had made the act to stop the hoarding from the public happening. Britain does something that's not too off of that. So it wouldn't fully recover its manufacturing or its economic output until the end of the Great Depression. And of course, the end of the Great Depression is headed into World War II. Yep. So that's why manufacturing and everything in the economy comes back.
It's the workforce too, because they've lost so many people.
Yeah. There had been attempts to fix the slump. They had the pound sterling was their standard, had been returned to the gold standard. So they had suspended their gold standard into World War I because, again, you're fighting a war and you're manufacturing shit, so you need to make it as cheap as possible. If you abandon the gold standard, you can print a bunch more money.
Hello, love. How would you like to end my great stamp or slump?
It had been returned to the pre-war exchange rate. It hurts British exports because the world market, all of their exports become far more expensive. That leads them to lower workers' wages, to become more competitive cost on the market. If you lower workers' wages, it's going to drop consumer spending power, and purchases are going to be made less and less. It keeps industrial areas in a recession pretty much throughout the 20s. So as we were talking about a kind of a false paper tiger situation of manufacturing and the economy happening in the United States, Britain just never gets back to that.
Ours is our economic thing was like a depression mullet. It was party in the front where all the cities are front and center where you could see, and it was poverty in the back. in all the rural areas. Because Britain is also looked at because of its status in the world as like a power and because of its longevity, when they do that thing of officially abandoning the gold standard in September of 1931, other countries are looking at it being like, oh, so are we not doing gold anymore? And they end up doing the same thing to kind of save their own economies. So this system that is already so fragile and delicate is just having shit thrown into it that's just making it less and less stable. And at this point, with everyone kind of doing their own thing, that's why so much is being done that goes without anyone noticing.
Yeah. You also have a situation in the UK where you have commonwealths, countries like Canada and Australia, and not India at this point in time. I think India, it took till like the 60s. But they're tying their currency to the British pound, abandoning the gold standard themselves. So now the choice that Great Britain made is going to affect two other countries very far away from them.
Yeah.
And it creates this market instability. So just going through the 20s alone, the unemployment rate in the UK hovered right around 14%. Some years it was down to 10. Its peak hit in 1921, so very early at 23%. Also, we're talking about a country whose population is going to be vastly smaller than the United States.
A landmass perspective.
The Labour Party ends up taking power in 1929, and it wasn't full of economists. Unfortunately for the United Kingdom, economists weren't rife within this Labour Party that takes power. They had this classical approach of a balanced budget at pretty much any cost. A balanced budget during this point in time is always going to hurt growth in industry because there's not any money that's being put towards growing these industries. The October market crash was precipitated, and we talked about it a little bit in the previous episode, by British financier Clarence Hattrey. He was caught committing fraud. He was trying to float himself $1 million without any backing. As his entire empire collapses, there's a contraction in private lending. This isn't just the government lending money anymore. This was a guy who financed a lot of businesses who merged large steel companies inside of England that's now just off the map. After the Wall Street crash, British economists were split on how they were going to go. There was a chance to fall back off of this gold standard and be able to devalue your currency, be able to print more money. It was one choice. By then, worldwide investors were pulling gold from London at a rate of £2.5 million a day. That was how fast the gold was leaving England. So, if that's going to happen, if they're pulling all that gold out, moving off the gold standard is probably not a terrible idea, right?
Mm-hmm. If we don't have any, like, why would we be held to the standard with it?
This gentleman named MacDonald had backed the idea to balance the budget by raising, I believe he was the prime minister. He wanted to balance the budget by raising taxes, cutting spending, and cutting unemployment bennies by 20%. Now, at this point in time, we're talking the 1930s, we had an unemployment rate that was hovering around 14%. They have unemployment benefits for these people that are still trying to find work. We're slashing their benefits by 20%, cutting down their buying power, and we're going to raise their taxes. This all sounds like a very, very bad idea. And it was, because this almost gets him axed pretty much immediately.
So, like, even just getting this far into the ramifications, talking about Britain, and having this all tie back to Wall Street, are they just like fucking Yanks? Are they fucking like, how did this happen? How did they fuck this up? Like, first the Revolutionary War, now this, and then guess what? Here in just a few years, we're all over there and everything.
Yeah.
And at that point, they can't complain because having us over there is going to help them end the war quicker.
We built up a little goodwill with World War One.
We did, but then, I mean, we're fucking them now.
Yeah, they were waiting for the other shoe to drop.
They were probably cool with like the common soldiers because everyone had gotten fucked. Anybody in the upper echelons, the government or anything like that with the greasy dick that did the fucking, they were probably not welcome.
Yeah.
Sorry for the imagery there.
I could see that. Instead of McDonald getting axed, they decide on this kind of national government conglomeration of parties that's formed. 20's unemployment rate of the average of 14% had ballooned to 20% by 1931. Some of these regions were hit so much harder depending on the industry that was in that region. There were shipbuilding towns in the Northeast that had reached 70% unemployment.
Because, I mean, the entire industry is probably, it's like one of those towns you think of like Norfolk. That's nothing but, Norfolk News. It's just a shipbuilding town. So if think of certain towns in Pennsylvania that might be just completely steel towns, 70%. Hershey, Pennsylvania. What if Hershey went under? 100% of Hershey's screwed.
What do you do if you're still the 30% in that town that has a job?
That's the people that are running the stuff that was there to support the larger business, like the grocers or the barkeepers or the launderers and like all of that stuff. But then what happens when the people who are keeping you in business no longer have jobs? So like, what does that do? What's still in business at that point?
Luckily, even though it's not a system that anybody wanted to be on, there was the social safety net of welfare over there. They had been a country long enough and they had seen enough homelessness and unemployment throughout a millennia that they realized that a social safety net was necessary. In late 1931, there's an adjustment to social welfare, or to the welfare program, that kind of levels the playing field, because previously the amount of welfare that you were receiving was based on your previous contributions. Now it was switched from previous contributions to the need. So the people that hadn't contributed much before are now able to get it based upon how bad of a situation that they're in.
Okay.
Northeast, like I say, 70% unemployment. The hunger marches that happened in the 20s and 30s came from a lot of these regions. The largest one came in 1932. I don't want to poke fun at the English too much about this because it's a hunger march and it's a sad thing. We had 25,000 march for their bonus on the bonus expeditionary force in America.
Yeah, the veterans from World War One.
They rounded up 5,000 people.
And again, they're small.
Yeah. Again, it's not something to poke fun at. But
they didn't have as far to march. There's not as far of a place to march to pick up, people.
Fair, yeah.
They're not just going to do loops around.
They're just going to circle London.
Yeah, just a swirl that gets a little closer every time.
Recovery proved pretty difficult based upon their debts compared to the GDP that they were producing. Their debts accumulated 180% of their yearly GDP.
That they were paying to go ahead and pay off the stuff that they had accrued during World War One.
You're never going to be able to pay off a debt when you're making that much less to make those payments. Their bounce back was due to abandoning the gold standard, dropping interest rates when they abandon the gold standard because they can start to manipulate their currency. It brings this massive construction boom in the South. And then by 1936,
that's unfortunate because that's the area that gets bombed the most.
They built it up for a few years just to see it get knocked down. 1936, mass rearmament is starting to buoy the rest of the country to prep for World War II. Those shipbuilding areas in the Northeast, all of a sudden they're building submarines, they're building cruisers, they're building everying for the British Navy.
Rebuilding the Royal Navy.
The Royal Navy, to start preparing for what is coming. And this is just out of necessity. This wasn't an idea. This wasn't a plan.
And it's not what's coming in the sense of like, we know that Germany is going to do something. It's them looking around at Europe and possibly seeing a buildup or an opportunity of saying, we need to modernize. like the same thing that we used in World War One. That's not going to be the same thing that's going to dominate the next, era of war or whatever you want to say. So we need to start doing it now. There probably was some indication of the Germans building it up because they could only do so in certain places.
Yeah.
That would have been along the waterways that could then have access to like the North Sea and everything. But I mean, even them starting to put a little money back into build-up, it wasn't huge because you couldn't pull funding away from, like you were talking about, those social programs that were keeping people afloat and being like, well, we need to pour it into soldiers. Like, why? We just fought a war. Like, what are you guys preparing for? We just fought the Great War 15 or however many years ago it was. We're still recovering from that. There's still people that are unemployed.
No way Germany's building themselves back up, right? Because you guys have been keeping an eye on them since that Treaty of Versailles.
Well, and obviously, like, look at us. We won the war. And this is going to be a common theme kind of throughout a lot of these countries is if we're doing this bad and we won the war, how bad is the country doing that is having to pay us and lost the war? So not only did they lose, but they're also sending their money to us. So we have our money and their money, and we're doing this bad. They have got to be doing just horrible. Zero threat, right?
They're manufacturing stick guns. They are manufacturing rock grenades.
Well, and here's the thing, too. We talk about it in a few of the World War I episodes, but Germany itself wasn't really damaged.
No.
That's why there was this big thing, and what leads to something that Hitler's going to touch on a lot is we weren't in a bad position. We were sabotaged during the Great War. We need to, we were broken from the inside. And people believe that because unlike World War II, that's going to involve a lot of bombing campaigns, that wasn't really a thing that got close to the populated centers of Germany. So German infrastructure is still very much in place. Its economy is not doing great, but if it makes a few tweaks and really puts all its eggs in one basket, it has the ability to really get up and running. But that's not the expectation, because why would a country that just lost and has this Treaty of Versailles in place that explicitly tells them, hey, no doing that, they definitely wouldn't do that, right? And it's not like we're going to watch them because we got, our own problems at home.
And it's not, I think we've talked about it a lot leading into World War I. Germany was hot. Germany was a leading center of progress in Europe before World War I. That's the reason why they wanted to feel it out during World War I, because they had been sitting in probably third, maybe fourth, somewhere in the pecking order in Europe.
Yeah. Definitely behind Great Britain, France, and then it probably would have been someone in front of Germany.
Yeah.
It would have been Austria-Hungary.
Probably. Oh, the Empire, yeah.
Yeah.
So Germany, in a sense,
They
went
were the
into
old
World
dog,
War I.
though. Huh? They were getting ready to get old Yellard.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they were kind of on their last legs. Same thing with the Ottoman Empire. It's the reason why Germany went into World War I is because they were trying to establish this pecking order. So it's not like if they were able to retool and rebuild that they would have to push themselves to new heights, because they had already been able to manufacture a very apt army during World War I.
Yeah.
So they know what they're doing.
France?
France.
How do they know it as?
La Grande Depression.
Sounds romantic, actually.
A little bit.
Like someone, well, hold on. Like, I loved her so much that after she left me, I suffered from La Grande Depression.
Definitely more emotional sounding, for sure.
Yeah.
Or the crisis. And compared to the U.S. and U.K., France actually had a pretty solid 1920s. Their economy had grown year over year by more than 4%, so they're seeing growth throughout the 20s. The 1930s only saw a decline of about 0.6%. Unemployment peaked at under 5%. Now, there's a darker side to why our unemployment only peaks under 5%.
Yeah. I mean, and here's the thing, too. We'll get to that. You can sadden the people here in just a second. France was kind of initially insulated from a lot of that, like, early crisis, because in France fashion, it had a massive cache of the words gold, and its economy was built on and I actually kind of really like this aspect, was built on small to medium businesses rather than like complex stock markets.
You should love it because that's how it should be.
I know, that's okay. Yeah. So, the crisis didn't like severely strike them until 1931. So like 2 years after the actual like crash, and its unemployment remained low compared to Germany. But its economic growth flatlined for the rest of the decade because while its unemployment remained low, you're still counting on something to occur to create more workers, and something that had happened to them that kind of prevented this expected amount of contribution to the workforce to not really be there.
Yeah. What was the number? 1.2 million soldiers that were lost in France, and casualties, and all of these men, young, svelte, of working age, are now wiped off the map. So it's hard to have a massive number of unemployment when your workforce is diminished by 1.2 million or however many people it was.
So it's so low because you don't have enough people to have a high unemployment because you lost a huge portion of them. But it's also making growth stagnant because, as much as some people would like to debate this, youth kind of leads to innovation of certain things. And when you lose a whole segment of that young generation, you're going to stagnate. You're going to have to wait till that next generation comes up to try to play some type of catch up. Well, it's not going to occur fast enough. France ends up kind of like refusing to abandon the gold standard or devalue the franc.
Because they had so much gold.
I know. Yeah. But this also made French exports incredibly expensive and completely uncompetitive globally, which again leads to part of that like flatlined growth because none of the stuff they're sending out people can afford to get.
Yeah.
So what also leads to kind of this, with this kind of financial instability in there as well, is different groups that are controlling the country. So different like parties in government. And there's these disagreements over like mandatory government spending cuts, like deflation policies, and all of this political unrest or social unrest that ends up leading to the rise of this like popular front coalition that's, I guess, kind of more like left leaning or whatever that would be considered in France. I don't know how they do their hot and cold.
I think they were considered socialist.
Okay.
But also the radicals, they had a radical party that was just kind of slightly left of center. So radical seems like a weird title to give them.
And this was in 1936. So when you don't have like stability within the government, some things get thrown to the wayside, and some of that could be defense or what you're spending, money on, especially if someone doesn't have the opportunity to stay in there long enough to see like a specific vision completed.
There's certainly some things that I just look at France and can smile at. And one of them is just their general disdain for their government. Like,
you start to wonder, because France is a very old established country, if that's just the natural order of things.
Everything is good until the populace gets pissed off, and then all of a sudden there's a riot that leads in 1934 to the fall of the government.
Well, and what this ends up leading to is this decision on France's part, instead of saying, okay, what do we think, the last war was a very static. Static is when it's in the same place. Very static war. It was trench warfare. How do we prevent something like that from happening again? Let's just make a wall or a line. The Maginot Line will pour a ton of resources into that. They won't be able to get back into France to create any, even if they do invade us again. And then instead of having to go ahead advancements in like tanks or planes and things like that, we still have the most artillery and most of the resources anyway, especially after these countries are kind of have been defeated. And again, looking over at Germany, we're getting paid by them. How bad are they doing if they're having to pay us money and they can't build this thing up because we made them sign that piece of paper in the railroad card?
Well, Germany was doing a massive favor to France because throughout the entirety of this depression, production never fell more than 20% in the country of France. Mm-hmm. And so that means if their production is still going and people are still able to buy, they're not having to sink the reparations that they're getting from Germany necessarily into their economy.
They were also pulling a bunch of resources out of Germany as well, because that was one of the big talking points for Hitler, was that French bellies are being fed by like German crops or something like that.
Yeah, well, they had different times when they had occupied the Ruhr and the other economic hotbed in the area down there.
The Rhineland? Or that's the Ruhr Valley is right there.
Yeah.
But you're thinking, oh God, I saw the name too.
The industrial hub.
Yeah. Let me look for it.
Okay.
Sudetenland?
Maybe. We'll stick a pin in yes for that now. But these German reparations are basically just being passed off to the United States for their war debt. So Germany's paying their war debt when they're paying. Mm-hmm. And then when Germany's missing payments, France is like, well, fuck you. We're going to come in and take over the Ruhr. We're going to occupy this area because you're not following through on your Versailles agreements. And it's kind of a situation where Germany is still getting picked on, but at the same time, the biggest factor in what's going on is being financially picked on. You can be as angry as you want about French occupation, but the French are only there because you were stuck with this enormously high indemnity that you had to pay to them. Right around the time that this Popular Front gets voted in that you were talking about in 1936, they embark on some kind of, I guess, some more social safety nets, but they're fighting for the people. They introduce holiday pay, and they make mandatory 40-hour work weeks. They are revitalizing the workers' rights. There's a rise in wages that happens in June 1936. It increased workers' buying power. This is coming at a great time because while everybody else was using the war to pull themselves out of a massive hole, France is kind of treading enough water while just hoping and praying that this doesn't happen a second time. And if it does, the Maginot Line's going to have them protected.
Well, France has always won. France will endure.
Yeah, even with a hand or two, somehow they come out on top.
Well, if they've all got the mentality of your boy, the asparagus.
Charles de
Gaulle, then they didn't need anyone's help. France would have liberated itself.
Yeah, would have taken a little bit longer. Would have taken some MacGyver.
Here's the deal. I can't even talk shit about France because having some historical know-how, we'd still be fucking speaking British and have really bad teeth if it weren't for the French.
I hate hot tea. I do not like hot tea. Love iced tea, not hot tea. When you do the handoff, there's a new socialist government agenda that finally kind of is bordering on maybe a little too far to the left. There's a correction in government, and you get a new government that's formed in 1938, which is in the goddamn nick of time to get a new government in there. And then at that point, armaments industry is in full swing for World War II.
Okay, so by 38, that's happening. I think you said it was 38 too with Britain is when the Navy started to get built back up and everything, or very close to it. So they obviously know something is happening. World War II not technically kicking off until 39, but if they're at 38, even 30, it might have been 36 with Britain. They're so far behind because we're going to get to Germany. We're going to save Germany for last because that's where most of this actually comes to really, the chickens come home to roost. But this is what shows you how far behind they are. They're probably aware that Germany's up to something, but they're just trying to play a desperate game of catch up.
They're closing their eyes and they're putting their fingers in the ears when it comes to Germany.
Pretty much. And France should be especially aware considering that they're right there. Here's the other thing too. Spanish Civil War. You have, I was thinking about the whole pilot thing where like they were training the pilots over in the Spanish Civil War.
Oh yeah.
Okay. You would have to get the planes and the pilots over there, right? Does that mean they're flying over France? And so France is just constantly having these like German pilots and fighters flying over the country and being like, where do you think they're going? What are they doing? Or do they have to take a long way around by like ships and then assemble them there? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, because if they even went south, they would be running into the south of France. And even if you're training them over there.
And they've got limited distances because they're fighters.
Yeah. Maybe
a question for another day.
Yeah, maybe they're hoping to fly down into Italy and then go from Italy.
Speaking of Italy, let's get to Italy. Italy's economy was severely fragile. Now, Mussolini was in power, I think, since
1922 is when Mussolini. We did a whole episode on him.
Go listen to, didn't we? I think did Benny get 2?
He might have gotten 2. But I forgot that he jumped in that early.
Oh, yeah. That's why Hitler was such a fanboy of him.
That's
right. That's why he was, "You're my only friend, Joe."
Hitler had 3 pictures up in his office.
He sent a secret mission to bust Benny out of fancy prison.
At that point in time, it was more, I need to get a hold of you instead of I
got to keep the black shirts in check. I got to keep them low.
I've cleaned up enough of your shit in World War II that I've kind of had enough of you. But Hitler had pictures of Frederick the Great on his wall. He had a picture of Nito, and then he had a picture of Henry Ford sitting on his desk.
That's right.
So those were kind of his 3 guys. And Italy comes pretty close to failure. It's the deck of cards, or I guess the dominoes, and how they could have fallen here. Had Italy come close enough to failure that they had actually failed, I think World War II looks a fuzz different.
It does. And I mean, they are suffering from high unemployment, and Italy, isn't exactly flush with, raw materials like oil and coal. And to basically distract the public from, the domestic economic misery, when you read something in history is just so current, it repeats itself. So to distract the public from, and just sub in anything you want for domestic economic misery, you could sub in pedophilia scandals or kind of anything you want. Benito Mussolini or any other character launched the brutal invasion of Abyssinia, which is Ethiopia, in 1935. Or you launch the invasion or attack on another country that you're trying to get oil from and stuff like that.
Hey, maybe multiples.
Yeah.
Maybe you're knocking out world leaders in other South American countries.
Exactly. Again, this is just, I don't know, there's a certain playbook to these guys. The Ethiopian campaign combined with Italy's really heavy intervention in the Spanish Civil War, which took place from 36 to 39, pretty much drained their entire treasury. They weren't smart about this. Mussolini wasn't a smart guy. He was a very charismatic guy, but he was not smart about this.
And everybody he surrounded himself with were friends, and it was not a meritocracy.
A lot of sycophants. But what this resulted in is it leaves Italy's military just completely drained. Their equipment is very subpar and really, really unprepared for a conflict in 1939, which, in Ben's defense, they were not supposed to do any type of action according to the H-Man. Hitler told him, "Hey, chill. We're not doing anything for a few years." And then called him back up and was like, "We're going to have to move it up a bit, to now." And so completely not ready for it, but still attempting, because he had gone down there for Ethiopia. He's like, "I'll just take over the rest of North Africa and reestablish the Roman Empire."
He needed to get some points up on the board. He wanted to get his name on the trophy, so he had to do something.
And he had to, the strategic advantage of trying to pull British resources to have to defend North Africa and everything meant that it was going to buy Hitler more time from getting invaded by Britain and everything.
Mussolini thought he was attacking the fat underbelly, and it turns out that he was the only fat underbelly in North Africa at that point in time. The financial kind of crisis ends up peaking in 1932 for Italy. Government, as one would do in a fascist enterprise that they were running, begins their intervention. There was something called the Industrial Reconstruction Institute that had formed in January of 1933. And at this point in time, the banks had taken control of a lot of the industry because all of these companies were defaulting on their loans. So the bank owned a lot of these companies. The Industrial Reconstruction Institute then takes over all of the bank-owned companies. And Italy, say what you will about what they do, had the largest state-owned industrial sector in Europe. And that's with the exception of Russia, of course.
But that shows you what they were able to do. They couldn't do shit. They had the largest industrial capacity, and they couldn't do anything with it.
Yeah. It took till about 1935 to recover manufacturing levels in 1930. So they they had a long way to go to crawl back into it. And as we're talking, I believe it was it in 39 when Mussolini had told Hitler that it was going to be 2 years before they were ready?
Something like that, yeah.
And so their industries are already moving up. But as we talked about in the North African campaign, they're sending World War I mechanized armies down into North Africa
and
to try to
crossing their
fight.
fingers that the guys from Britain, they're like, hopefully they're doing the same and sending all their second-rate shit down to North Africa.
Turns out they didn't.
They sent Monty.
We got to do Monty again soon.
I know.
I miss Monty.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you, besides that, I mean, this was so much of a different approach. We talked about the way that UK and France kind of had this battle and this dancing around manipulating their currency and different approaches that they took to gold and social programs and all of these different things. And now we jump into a country of Italy who's fascist and just completely lets their country go to the point of where they say, okay, well, instead of letting private industry flourish, we're just going to turn everything into government-run organizations.
Yeah. And then makes it also very, very appealing, being clearly not very self-sufficient or not economically stable. It makes the offer of, hey, come do this thing with me and I'll let you take over a bunch of this land. You can conquer a bunch and then you guys will be flush with resources and everything. And you guys will be big and powerful. He's like, okay, yeah, I guess. All right, where are we moving on to now?
We want to go to one of the Commonwealths. We want to go to Australia.
We can go to Australia.
This was known in Australia as the SUSO. To all of our Australian listeners, good day. Great to talk to you again. We haven't talked about you in a while. Miss you. Australia was hit by the downturn with unemployment peaking at more than 32% in 1932. 1 in 3 people in the workforce are out of work in 1932. They became very, very reliant on government aid and relief projects to survive. The reason why they call it the SUSO is because they were given these things called SUSO stamps or tokens that they were able to use to redeem for just basic rations like flour and tea and sugar. And the big problem is their two main industries of wool and meat prices had tanked because we have a trade war that's going on in the 30s, a tariff war.
If there's a tariff war with England, it encompasses all of their areas.
Yeah, and these commonwealths are trying to survive with mild intervention on Britain's part because Britain, for the most part, one of the things that we didn't mention about them was able to gain a lot because they just sucked as many resources as they possibly could and as much money out of India. Because, again, they weren't a commonwealth, I don't believe, at this point in time. I'm going to keep saying it, and I'm going to be so wrong, but I feel like it's the 60s.
Yeah.
I'll have to look it up eventually. But that's the two main enterprises that kind of help a country crawl out of a hole gradually is wool and meat prices. And if you're thinking about where the fighting is going on during World War II, you're going to need a lot of wool.
Yeah.
And you're going to need a lot of meat that you can turn into rations for these guys. And they go sort of in the way that England goes because they are a commonwealth. Where do we want to go next? China?
Let's go to the Far East.
I couldn't find the fun name for this in China.
Wouldn't have been able to pronounce it.
No, probably not. But China responds in a completely different way. We talked about how fascism kind of failed in Italy to really make a big response. China responds after being largely unaffected by most of the Depression, partially because they're communists. They have this struggle going on and this fight between the communists and the other forces, and they're staying out of more international sectors.
Here's the thing, too. We've talked about China in this way. They got fucked with so much that eventually they just turned isolationist, figured out something that worked for them. again, I can't speak to if it works for the bulk of their population or anything like that.
Probably not.
But it's weird to say that the two countries that were affected the least by the Great Depression were China and the Soviet Union.
Yeah, if you're not playing ball with everybody else in a capitalist society, stuff's going to go different.
They were the kids over in the lot behind the ball field hitting each other with rocks. Playing rock tag.
What'd you guys lose today? Nothing. We didn't invest anything. Us too. This is fantastic. Any sort of fight that they had was counterbalanced by heavy public works projects. And really part of it for China is they didn't really have the full long wait for the run up to World War II because Japan had come into Manchuria in 1931. So this is a situation where China, seeing Japan
it is
now.
so weird to think that like there were already these wars like going on between countries, and then like eventually enough countries started going to war with each other that everyone was just like, fuck war, it's World War.
Game on.
Yeah, people just start picking sides.
They wouldn't feel the full-scale attack kind of into China proper. I believe it was the Second Sino-Japanese War until 1937. But at the same time, you have 6 years to where China will be responding in their armaments to try to keep Japan out. And as we know, it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
Japan was a whole different beast when it comes to trying to deny them land, I guess you could say. Next, Canada.
Sure.
I couldn't find it for sure, but I'm 95% sure that they considered the Great Depression as the Great Bummer, eh?
I think it's the Great Sorry.
The Great Sorry.
The Great Sorry, eh?
I feel sorry for you. They get double fucked by the market crash and the Dust Bowl because they're on the same continent as us, and they are connected to this same Great Plains region as us. So not only did they have to deal with the market crash, which they were heavily invested in because they were our neighbors, they also had to deal with the Dust Bowl just wrecking their agricultural
And then
programs.
also the economic fallout of Great Britain because of the tariffs and all that shit.
Yep. Industrial
Why
production.
are you still all so polite?
Yeah, no kidding. And why in the world do you still have the king's face on your money? Blows me away. Industrial production had fallen by 1932 to only about 58% of what it had done in 1929. So it had almost fallen by half. The total national income had fallen 56% from the 1929 totals. By 1933, they had reached 30% unemployment.
Another third.
It's so incredible that a country could survive that high of an unemployment rate. Export-driven economy is crushed by plummeting wheat prices, by bad drought that they're going through.
Again, anything that we went through from an ecological standpoint, they're going through the same shit. And anything that we're growing, chances are they're growing similar because of the
environments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Their heavy reliance on exports of raw materials is crushed when these Smoot-Hawley tariff acts come online because it turns into this tariff war to where they're not going back and forth in trade. The restriction of imports by the United States and Britain because they were trying to have people buy local themselves saw Canada exports fall from values of $1.3 billion in 1928 to just $500 million in 1932.
So more than 50%, closer to like 60.
Man, 4 years. It's a quick drop. Maybe the thing that hurt them the most, U.S. imports of Canadian maple syrup.
No. No.
It dropped to under 400,000 gallons annually. In the early 30s is when this happens.
It's the toughest pill to swallow, this whole thing.
The late 20s. Nice. The late 20s, the United States was importing over 1 million gallons of maple syrup. It's a major export for them.
Yeah.
It's got to hurt. I imagine that's probably why our depression got so bad, was because we didn't have all that extra maple syrup to make us happy.
I mean, it's definitely going to contribute to it. You know what makes, like, if you're trying to just piece pancakes together with flour and something,
Yep.
That's one thing, too, that I didn't mention in the first episode with, like, stretching food and making desserts. You have no idea how many desserts I saw with recipes that advertised. They were like, no milk, no egg desserts. And I was like, and like no sugar. I was like, oh my God, like what is in this dessert? But at the same time, if you just put flour and water together, make a pancake, it might taste horrible, but you put maple syrup on that, maple syrup can make almost anything edible.
Yeah. And if you don't believe us, do us a favor. Go put an Eggo in the toaster and just raw dog it and eat it without syrup. Then we can talk about how important syrup is.
Oh, you said Eggo.
An Eggo waffle.
Oh, I thought you said an egg. I was like, the fuck are you cooking your eggs?
Yeah, probably not in a toaster.
Probably not.
Yeah, you get yourself a waffle, you pop it in the toaster, you eat it dry, and then we'll talk about how important maple syrup
An
is.
animal just raw dogging an Eggo.
All right, before we continue on, bathroom break?
Sure. Well, hello. Listen, while we head to the restroom and get ourselves something to drink, why don't you do something nice for yourselves? Head on over to patreon.com/historicallyhigh and get signed up for a little bonus content. I mean, come on, you deserve it.
If you want to keep up with this, our main source of social media is going to be our Instagram, which is historically high pod, POD.
You can also head over to, it's Twitter. It's X. It's Twitter. Come on. At historically high. And that's high, H-I like high.
If you have any recommendations you want to get to us, just want to reach out and say hello, you can hit us up on our email at historicallyhighpodcast, HIGH podcast @gmail.com.
All right. And with that said, let's get back to the good stuff. All right. Moving on to Mother Russia, the Soviet Union. Because the Soviet Union operated under a closed communist system, it had a lot of insulation, a lot of protection from the collapse affecting all of the other Western capitalist stock markets. They were kind of just sitting back. You know what? I don't think they were watching a lot because they were dealing with a lot of shit up to that point.
They were in a very unique position of overthrowing their monarchy.
Mm-hmm.
So that happened in what, 1918? Because that was what, or 1916-ish?
It was like the December Revolution or whatever it was.
That saw them exit World War One.
Yep, and then it saw Tsar Nicholas overthrown by, and then Lenin put in, right? And then after Lenin, Stalin went in?
Yes. Yeah, that sounds right.
So Joseph Stalin basically uses this time that everyone else is kind of at their weakest to buy a bunch of like cheap Western machinery, hire unemployed foreign engineers, and basically through this, one of his little 5-year plans that he did, just goes through this rapid industrialization and kind of reestablishing kind of in the same way that Italy did, where they have the control of all of the means of everything since they're rebuilding all of this industrialization, which is weird because kind of thinking about it in World War II terms, like, I guess it was not so much that they were super unprepared, it was that Hitler kind of boned them after the agreement.
Yeah. Yes.
So
that was it.
Can you imagine, though, like this actually served to the benefit of the Soviet Union because they were able to afford all of this stuff on the cheap that all of these other Western countries were getting rid of and basically just like build up his country. So he was actually actively advancing while everyone else was just trying to kind of scrape by to survive.
With old technology. But
he still buying a lot of it, apparently.
Yeah.
But this kind of creates this massive, heavy industrial base in the Ural Mountains, which allows the Soviet Union to construct, thousands of tanks and aircraft in that area where it was protected far enough away that Germany couldn't touch it. So that distance, how we always talk about during those episodes between where Germany invaded and actually even getting to Moscow and then even past that further, toward the Urals, it's like, we're just going to make all our stuff here. We can send it to the front. But if they can't stop us from making it, like, there's no point.
I wonder if intelligence at that point had come back, and when they finally spotted them, they said, "Oh, all their manufacturing's in the Ural Mountains."
They couldn't get that. Well, how would they get that far?
But even if they got it, that's the German high command response is just, "Where are the Ural Mountains?"
That's probably, yeah.
We barely found Moscow. We had to drive so far in to find Moscow. Now we have to find the Ural Mountains?
They're like, can we get a hold of one of Catherine's maps that she had written or that she had drafted?
Go with me on this one. We can't touch them flying north. Is there any chance we could touch them flying south?
Looping all the way around, not knowing how big Russia is. We're going to go backwards. But this is what allowed Russia, after it was able to kind of get its feet under it. And again, with Russia, the biggest problem was Stalin, because they had gone through that military purge. This makes me realize how much the purge hamstrung even Russia even more so, because Soviet Union has all of this infrastructure to basically match the capacity, if not exceed it, for like production than Germany does. They just have such inept military leadership from the beginning because of the purge that it takes them a while for just the leadership to catch up with their industrial capabilities.
Yeah. For as much as the Depression didn't touch them, it wasn't like the Soviet Union.
People were still depressed.
Well, yeah, the Soviet Union wasn't free of this because we had, in 32 and 33, there was the Holodomor, the Ukrainian famine that happened. And in that time, there were at least 5 million people that died and 3.9 million people just in Ukraine alone.
Jesus.
So while we were talking about 2 million people homeless kind of towards the tail end of the Great Depression, there was a point in time when 5 million Soviets died because of a famine.
See, that just makes capitalism look like even more pussy bullshit, because it's like, oh, were your 2 million homeless? Were you homeless? Yeah, we had 5 die because they couldn't eat.
It wasn't anything besides kind of something that was manufactured by the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
This was a Stalin-esque thing that was going on because he was trying to feed these growing cities and just basically strip the land of Ukraine of any kind of grain or resources, and all those people died. So if I'm going to take one or the other, I do feel like I'm taking Great Depression over deadly famine.
Yes. Puts it in perspective.
Definitely does.
All right.
Anything else with the Soviets?
No.
The Japanese. Between 1929 and 1931, Japan's economy had shrunk by 8%. There were some logical steps that they end up taking in the form of a plan, kind of hatched, I guess it was more of an ideology, a belief system maybe, from a British economist named John Maynard Keynes, or Kinsey. Kinsey, we'll go with Kinsey, whatever. He does Keynesian economics. His solution to solving the Great Depression was twofold. You were going to, 1, reduce interest rates, 2, government investments in industry. Easy 1-2 punch. You reduce interest rates, you allow more money into the populace, government invests in industry. The biggest problem with this, though, is that turns into a massive deficit for your government. You're deficit spending so much. Japan understands that there needs to be a solution here. And I'm talking about Japan in pretty glowing terms, knowing what they're going to go over and do in China and then to us in the Pacific
War. You got to try to stay in the moment.
Yeah. They introduced this large stimulus package that funded military expenditures. There were rural emergency relief programs for the rice and silk industries because in the Great Depression, there's not a lot of silk buying going on. Rice surprised me. I figured rice, maybe the price was different from wheat, but I feel like rice would have been a pretty cheap.
I feel like rice and potatoes would have been kind of the equivalent between the different countries.
Oh, yeah. I could see that.
Like a starch or a carb.
Yeah. They dump 860 million yen into these programs. They had these massive irrigation projects. They're building roads. There's land improvements. Checks for farmers go directly out to try to kind of cushion some of the loss in those industries. This was kind of wild. So 76% of the towns and villages in Japan were designated for revitalization. And instead of the Japanese federal government, right? Country government?
Just the Japanese government, I guess.
Okay. The Japanese government, instead of making the choices for themselves, they created these local kind of committees that lived in these cities or these towns and villages, and they allowed them to draft their own like debt reduction plans as far as like where to save money, plans to lower living costs for the citizens in the area.
That makes a ton of sense because everything is individualized because one area is not like the other.
Yeah, there's no blanket solution for areas that just do different things.
See, I see what you mean here. You got to stay in the moment because you got to give them their props for doing something so, forward thinking. But at the same time, you're also thinking forward to what they're going to be doing.
Yep. I'm thinking about some stuff that happens in Nanjing. I'm thinking about some stuff that happens in the
Thinking about all the
Philippines.
things that happen.
Thinking about some death marches, some not good stuff. But to follow that up, they end up devaluing the currency by abandoning the gold standard. They devalue the currency off of, it's like 60-ish% against the US dollar. So yen is growing at a very fast rate to where they can be printing it. Exports become wildly desirable because they're so cheap. That boosts manufacturing. It just changes the approach to how trade goes, because if you make something so cheap that even the tariff that's put on it will still keep the price competitive, you're going to be able to move stuff.
Yeah. You just have to move it in quantity.
Yeah, you might not be doing silk, but as you were talking about with the starch to starch comparison, rice can be sent to a lot of places.
People don't need silk to survive.
Rice is always going to be necessary. I feel like Japan, again, notwithstanding what they do later, this was a very logical response. They weren't scared to spend against their budget to make sure that their people can get moved through the system faster.
Correct. In turn, that was them taking care of things from like a social aspect, from a material aspect. That's when they get shitty. When they're like, we don't have the material infrastructure or the resources to keep this up long term, where you got to go out and do all the horrendous shit to get that stuff.
It feels so weird to juxtapose the way that they handled this to kind of what
it's because, again, anybody that was not Japanese in their eyes was...
But even like their culture today.
Yeah.
Where they just kind of run their people into the ground at the price of, I guess, advancement technology.
I guess, yeah.
Instead of looking to try to help their people, they're like, why aren't you at work? Go sleep in that bush for 3 hours, sleep off the hangover from the alcoholism that you have, run over to a vending machine, buy some panties, sniff them, and get back in that
Get your mind right. Get back in the game. All right. Speaking of panty vending machines, Austria. I don't think they have those in Austria, but I haven't been there, so I cannot say for 100% certain if they do or not.
I bet they have some wild stuff in vending machines. I guarantee you they have cigarettes in vending machines like we used to have here.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
So even though it's a pretty small nation, Austria really contributed heavily to triggering Europe's financial meltdown. Jumping back a little bit, on May 11th of 1931, Austria's largest bank, which was called Kreditanstalt, announced that it had lost over half its capital. It was one of those, I guess, like too big to fail type situations, but it held 27% of the entire country's banking assets. Man. More than a quarter of the country's, and it had lost half of that. Just millions of people.
An eighth of the value is just gone from an entire country?
Yes.
Oh my God.
The government scrambled to basically like bail out the bank, caused this huge panic because, of course, this is going to have to get out with it being a huge bank like this. It triggers these massive bank runs like we had talked about where people are just rushing in to withdraw everything. across all of Central Europe and basically driving all of the funds completely out of the region. And I don't know if we've really touched on it because I can't speak to European banking, but during this time, this is when people brought in money, left it there thinking it was safe, leaving the bank, and then the bank using that money to make investments or to loan out and everything. So when that money's gone, that physical money, it's gone. There's no insurance or anything like that. So when that money leaves the bank, it's not like, hey, give us a few days to try to call the banks in the area and gather it back up so you can make your withdrawal. It's, no, I'm sorry, sir, you no longer have a savings account.
Can you maybe make a phone call? No, not necessary.
There's no one to call. We're the fucking bank, man. There's not a magical place where we keep your money.
You speak to a manager. He's on the roof right now. I don't know what he's doing up there.
He's trying to get the window open up in his fourth floor office. All right. And moving to, I guess, the star of this show. The one who takes, the pièce de résistance, the one that takes advantage of this, Germany. Germany's the most fragile country in Europe after World War I, just because all it relies on for this artificial prosperity or whatever it is the American loans to pay off its reparations. And as soon as something stops the influx of that money coming in, they're done.
Is it fair to say that Germany had a 30-ish year run of the highest highs and the lowest lows?
I mean, yeah, it depends on how you define it. As far as like the people from within that country, like what kind of fucking roller coaster was that? From, I mean, think if you were like, let's go with like 10 to 12 years old during World War I. So you're actively aware of what's going on. You were old enough once people came back to start understanding the implications for it. 20 years later, you're 32. You're definitely still young enough to serve, and you go and fight in this other war. And in the time underneath, you saw the country being very prosperous during World War I, because again, that's how the public actually perceived it. Then you see the downturn, then you see the nationalism kick back in, and what things are happening during the early 40s. Yeah, man, that perspective would be pretty nuts.
Especially you go into World War I, kind of the precursor to the Blitzkrieg, you are smoking through France. So not only does it feel like industry and everything was going good leading into this, now you've proven on a stage of battle that you are somebody that's not to be fucked with.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, everybody gets pushed back towards Germany and you stop hearing so much about the wins. And then all of a sudden, this government leaves and this Weimar Republic comes in and replaces them, and you have to find out that you just lost a world war. You lost the Great War. And then all the countries that you lost the Great War to slap this giant contract on you that's basically going to hamstring you for the foreseeable future.
It takes away your future, your future economic success.
Then the roller coaster that follows that is, I guess, a lending of relief from the United States in the form of a stimulus and capital, and then a restructuring of the debts that you owe. So you're thinking that there's hope, there's something great there, we're going to be able to build this.
Yeah, and things still weren't great.
No, but at the same time, they were on an upswing. Things are feeling better, and we'll talk about it. This is just a quick 5-minute layout of this. Things are turning up, everything's going great. This is part of the reason why Hitler can't intervene any faster, is because the Weimar Republic is actually making things a little bit better with the help of the United States.
Do you think part of that, too, it was ever framed in the way, I didn't look this up, but if you have the Treaty of Versailles, and part of the agreement is to allow the leadership that's in place at that point, do you believe to a certain degree, or do you play on the fact that that leadership is then in some way, shape, or form in bed with these other countries who are technically, as you're phrasing it, stealing from you in the form of these reparations? Because those people in leadership were endorsed by the people and agreed to do this to your country.
It's
You got like a fox in the hen house type situation, and you're rallying the people to get the fox out.
It's very much a Vichy situation.
Yeah.
Except for the roles are reversed.
And what's crazy though is he never plays it off like that, like in front of Hindenburg. Remember how he's all like the humility and everything like that to him, but then during speeches, like he's talking about the status of the country while not implicating directly the leadership of the country, I guess, which was one of kind of the I hate to give fucking clever credit or anything like that, but I mean, he knew exactly what to say.
And he was clever. We know that he was clever because pre-beer hall putsch time in prison, he was very loud, outspoken, an extremist that rallied against Jews and really pushed his feelings out into the public. Beer hall putsch messes up. He goes to prison. He comes back out. He's barred from public speaking and everything like that. He has to find a way to kind of chameleon his personality and soften his message in a way to where he's going after the nationalists, and then he's going after the socialists, and then he's going after the Democrats. And what do you do to that party? Call yourself all of them.
Yep.
It's conniving, but at the same time, you can recognize that as not too nuts.
You can recognize even though there's evil because you can recognize evil genius.
But back to the quick finish here. Weimar Republic's bringing things back. Great Depression hits. All the money and resources that the United States was giving you is gone. This sends you back into hyperinflation. This raises all sorts of...
It basically lights the fuse on the time bomb. That match has been held there the entire time, and it's not going to take much to set it off. And as soon as that match goes off, no one at that point, because everything is then turned inside, when that financial crisis hits, no one gives a fuck about your country. But then at the same time, Hitler's like, no one gives a fuck about us right now.
Yeah. So once the Weimar Republic fails, you get Hitler into power. He's actually making things look good under the false pretenses of just trying to create a nation. Then you get Lebensraum. You're back into Blitzkrieg, just like World War I. You are winning wars at home. You're hearing, hey, we're back. This is where we were before. This is the European dominance that I grew up with. Then all of a sudden stuff goes wrong. And then all of a sudden Hitler falls. And then the ultimate last thing that you have to deal with after this crazy-ass 30-year, not all connected ride is you have to come to grips with your country was responsible for a Holocaust.
Yeah.
That feels like the highest and lowest that you can get.
Well, there was like a 20 to 25 year period where your country was just like not looked upon like, and now you just got to hope something like that doesn't happen again.
There was nary a boring day in that 30-year stretch in Germany.
Yeah. So kind of to lay it out as far as kind of how everything ties into Germany and the situation in Europe. So you have the $33 billion debt that was created by the Treaty of Versailles that's supposed to be paid back to Great Britain and France.
Do we want to knock out some basics in the treaty?
Go ahead.
1919, Treaty of Versailles. Germany is required to accept full responsibility for World War I, as they should have. No problems there. They undertook reparations payments that amounted to about 132 billion gold marks. These were broken up into A and B bonds, which totaled about 50 billion. These gold marks that Germany was unconditionally obligated to begin paying immediately to the allies that were affected and the countries affected. C bonds totaled about 82 billion gold marks, and they were kind of like an interest-free threat of future payments dependent on the ability of the future economy to pay.
Okay.
So it was everything's coming up front with these A and B bonds. These C bonds are if you get way too advanced and your economy just jumps and goes crazy, then you're going to owe us the rest of this.
Gotcha.
Along with
the
that,
more you make, the more you pay.
Exactly, yeah. So don't think that you're going to rebuild yourself in a way where you're going to have excellent financials, because we'll take some of that if you do. By 1924, there was this thing called the Dawes Plan, and it addresses this hyperinflation that Germany is facing because they owe more than they could ever end up manufacturing at this point in time.
I think an economist had came in and said that the very most, and this was during the time that they were drafting the Treaty of Versailles, British guy came in and said they can only afford at the very max like $10 billion. Anything else is going to cause the country itself to just go into an economic spiral, and you guys are going to be dealing with a completely different issue.
A German, I guess, a gold mark at this point in time. This is when they had like the giant bills, when they had like $10,000 Reichsmark bills and all that kind of stuff, because it didn't matter. You could put whatever value on it; it was pretty much valueless. The Dawes plan injected $800 million of gold marks that were loaned to Germany from U.S. banks to help stabilize this new form of currency, this Reichsmark. It fueled industrial recovery. There was a reduction of reparation payments to $250 million a year. It scaled up with improvement of the German economy, kind of like the C bonds did. And part of the Dawes plan was the Allied troops had to withdraw from the Ruhr Valley that they had occupied after missed payments from Germany. So it gave them a little bit of freedom, a little bit of breathing room. At the same time, they have this indemnity hanging over their heads, but it does give them an $800 million cash infusion. That's not nothing. 1929, the Young Plan stretches the debt wildly so far. So it stretches it into this long-term, kind of manageable payments. It slashes debt to $36 billion or 36 billion Reichsmarks. So the indemnity is lowered. The interest payments stretched out until 1988. You would have been born on this planet, and Germany would have still been paying interest payments had World War II not happened, or had we not had a reconciliation.
That's kind of nuts, yeah.
Average repayment was $473 million a year. So this was actually taken from the Reichsmark and moved into U.S. dollars. After the market crash, the U.S., they pulled the rug.
That's what it was. I mean, banks in the United States are terrified. It's kind of the same principle as like if the homeland is being attacked, you pull all the troops from your colonies or from wherever they're at. So these U.S. banks stop lending money to Germany and immediately go the other direction, immediately demand the repayment of the existing loans to get as much money back as they possibly can. Well, being completely cut off from the money coming from America, the German economy tanks. Without those loans, they could no longer afford to pay their reparations to the other allies. When they can't pay the reparations to the other allies, Great Britain and France can no longer afford to pay back the wartime loans to the United States. So it is all just collapsing within this circle that they've created of repayments and loans. Production in Germany plummets by roughly like 50%. By 1932, unemployment hits 30%, and it was nearly, I think they said 6 million people. So 6 million people out of work. July 1931, the Danet Bank collapses, prompting the government to freeze the Berlin Stock Exchange and start to implement these really strict, like, financial controls. Other people are looking in on what's going on. This isn't a point, I think, when Germany has started to rebuild up its military or anything like that. But from a financial standpoint, people that are looking and seeing these payments missing from Germany are now kind of looking inward and realize that the system is completely broken.
Yeah.
There's this thing called the Lausanne Conference where these international powers basically canceled Germany's not in the form of like tearing up the contract, but they're, I think, just putting the payments on cancel until they show that they can try to recover somewhat and they can try to start getting something out of them at least. But it's too little too late at that point, because the economy is completely devastated. It leaves this hollowed out Germany and skyrocketing unemployment. There are so many things that were outside of the Weimar Republic's control in this situation that anyone smart enough to be able to rally a specific message or to be charismatic enough to make promises of the things that are being missed in Germany, it's all just sitting right there. And it's not like the Weimar Republic can say they're wrong about this. Because the message
Yeah.
technically isn't about the Weimar Republic. What the message is about the unfairness of these other countries taking advantage of Germany. They're saying the existing government has not been able to fix it. They're not saying anything other than right now the current system in place is not working. And by that, they're suggesting that change to the leadership needs to take place.
Is there a little snifter of what you were talking about earlier, and maybe the connection of the countries that are pulling the money out of our country are the ones that made the deal with the Weimar Republic?
Yeah, definitely.
There had to be something there. I mean, the Weimar Republic, they were between a rock and a hard place, because I don't even know what happens. I don't even know how you go down that road if the United States requires you to pay back all the funding. What happens if you just say no?
I think that's kind of what had to happen, because they didn't have any of the money to even pay Britain or France to pay back those loans as well. Here's how quickly it happened. So the Nazi Party transforms from this fringe extremist group into the dominant political force in Germany by exploiting all of this economic misery from the Great Depression. So before the 29 stock crash, the Nazis were essentially like politically irrelevant. I think they won 2.6% of the vote in the 1928 elections. By 1932, so 4 years later, the Depression had helped them become the largest party in parliament. And Hitler knew exactly who to target because they were the easiest to target in the sense of trying to gather support. Desperate unemployed people, middle-class shopkeepers who had lost everything, bankrupt farmers, the people that made up the bulk of the people that were going to be making this decision, or the people that he needed to control to put himself in power. And he had this really simple message. I think we talked about it during the Hitler episodes, but it was the Arbeit and Brot, the work and bread, basically just making the really simple promise that, listen, under my control, under a strong authoritarian government, we would instantly be able to restore jobs and stability to the country. And at this point, people are so desperate and so dejected that they're just like, even people that had concerns had to kind of be like, sure, why not? I get like this other stuff isn't working. Why not let this guy have a shot?
What's the alternative?
I mean, and he's directly, here's the thing too, is people that still had the faith that the Weimar Republic, which was effectively operating as a, democracy, he's looking at this and saying like, look what it's doing for you. Like, this was what was set up and is supposed to work. Like, this is completely inept. It's weak, it's chaotic, and it's broken. We need to install something that's going to be working for us. And so they present themselves as, disciplined and orderly and very competent in comparison to like what they're presenting as the incompetence of democracy. They have the stormtroopers that were basically running public services like soup kitchens for the poor, and creating this visual, basically like smokescreen that they are the ones that are helping people, not the government.
This is the Yakuza.
Yeah.
They're out there showing their way. I have a hard time going down this line of thought because there's a kind of a trade-off that you would have to make, and I don't know how bad my life would have to be to kind of agree to go along with these plans, while at the same time having to remind myself that Hitler's plans weren't ultimately so front-facing that you would have any knowledge of how horrendous things are going to get.
Yeah.
And then the realization of how much malnutrition and poverty and hunger
influence you taking a risk. Or
yeah,
chance.
I mean, the trade-off when you lay all those things out, I can definitely understand Hitler's popularity in a situation that you didn't have to be even a believer that World War I was stolen. You just had to be so ground down that anything else was going to look different.
Someone was telling you, you don't deserve this. This isn't your fault. You deserve all these things. You deserve all the good things. And I want you to have the good things. And through me, you can have the good things. And so not only do you have, and I'm not saying that just simply his rise is what led to World War II and everything, but the environment that it created definitely did, but it also created how the response to what he was doing was going to be dictated. So the Great Depression kind of cripples the military, financial, and political capacity of both Britain and France. Leaves them in a position where they're not really willing to cooperate with each other. They're focused inward on what they can do. And so there's not really any cohesive oversight of what Germany's actually going to be doing. It puts them in kind of a position where, although Hitler's not looking to attack them directly right now, he knows that maybe they're not going to be paying close attention to what he's doing.
There's rules. The German standing army can only, I believe, be 100,000.
So yeah, so they had that. There was basically double-digit employment rates in Britain. So the government had this domestic relief over military spending, and I think we talked about that a little bit. But there was a 10-year rule. The military planners assumed no major war would occur, so they kept defense budgets really, really, low, well into the 30s. So there wasn't even really room for like design or advancement or anything like that. It was basically just keeping a standing military in case something small needed to happen in one of the colonies or a response like that. With France, again, like we talked about, they're just pouring their limited defense resources into the Maginot Line and hoping that that's enough to hold anyone off. It also creates this situation where public opinion, because of the effect on the war on fathers' sons, is very, very against any type of defense spending. So even any type of visual buildup of the military, whereas you're thinking you can't point to Germany and say, well, Germany's doing something or anything like that, because they're like, Germany's in the shit. And you guys are spending our money on defense, like spend it on something else. So you have public opinion working against you as well to even maintain positions of, being in political positions where you can actually affect any change.
Political positions in some countries, I guess maybe it's the makeup, because we would all like to believe that our politicians have our best interests at heart, right?
At this point, it's you can't.
You can't.
You would yes, you would in an ideal world, you would believe that that would be accurate.
And I'm sure that would have to weigh heavy on some of these governmental people's heads. Well, at the same time, you're in, I don't know, a situation that nobody else would want to find themselves in. Mm-hmm. Like you have the fate of the population of the country that you're supposed to govern hanging in the balance. And you know that a strict adherence to a balanced budget is going to keep you in a position to try to help them. But unfortunately, the strict adherence to the balanced budget is also the reason why you can't help them.
Exactly. I mean, when Hitler ends up remilitarizing the Rhineland in 1936, he annexes Austria. I think that's 1938. And then he demands the Sudetenland in 1938 as well. British and French, like intelligence offices between those countries, they're like, just so you guys know, our economies and militaries, we can't sustain a war right now. There is nothing we can do at the moment to stop what's going on there. And Chamberlain, who we've talked about several times, the biggest knock on him is the whole appeasement thing.
Yep.
But now we get to see it from a different perspective of looking at Chamberlain and saying maybe he's using the appeasement as like a stalling tactic to avoid a situation where they can't afford to be in a war at that point. Inflation, bankruptcy, just hoping to delay the conflict until British factories can actually ramp up the production of the stuff they're going to need to fight a war that he probably assumes they're going to inevitably be in. But that's going to require Britain to defend itself. That means radar has to be developed and all that manufactured. And the things they're going to need to protect the island, which is going to be advancement of aircraft like the Spitfire.
Well, from the exterior, you're in a hurry up and go. We got to get this figured out because our defense spending has been so low. Hitler, as we talked about during his episode, is appointed chancellor January 30th, 1933. Very shortly after that, you have the Reichstag fire that gets blamed on a communist. Questionable as to who lit the Reichstag on fire. I think
I mean, go back and listen to the episode,
Yeah.
and you'll probably make your own determination.
that basically nullifies the what would be the
Parliament.
Yeah, Parliament,
Yeah.
Congress. Along with that, in 1933, this guy named Heilmar Schrack, I don't know, some shitty German name, is appointed president of the Reichsbank, and basically he's calming these business fears, saying there's a new regime in, things are going to change. He starts structuring all of the regime's financing. By June 1933, you have the Reinhardt program that's introduced, and it's heavily subsidizing all of this infrastructure. You're directly injecting state funds into waterways, railroads, and you have this burgeoning national highway system known as the Autobahn
The Autobahn.
that's being constructed. Between 33 and 34, this volunteer labor service that was later named the Reich Labor Service is created, and this is a forcing young men into manual labor to improve the unemployment statistics. So you are lending out all of this money from a bank that you just put the guy in power in, and this basically gives you unlimited funds. Because whatever money you're floating out there, whatever debt that you're accruing, will ultimately be taken care of by all of the extra lands that you're planning on conquering
The acquisitions
in the future.
that you're hoping that you can acquire.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're kind of printing your own money at this point. And this leads to kind of an increase in industrial output and everything. But he's doing it in a way as well to not, at this point, just completely flaunt in the face of like the Treaty of Versailles when it comes to the military buildup aspect of it. They are building tractor parts that are actually like tank parts. They are training pilots in commercial airliners or like flight like that or glider clubs instead of making military aircraft. So they're building the infrastructure and the training needed for this kind of, thing, and making it very easy to just simply switch, flick the light switch or switch out some equipment, and they're making, weapons of war and everything. They're designing, they're building U-boats in sections in different spots of the country and then sending them all to one location to be constructed and like put into the water.
Was this taught?
That was who built like the submarine pens and
Oh, the
everything. I
pens,
don't know
not the
who was actually
submarines.
designing like the U-boats and everything.
Well, if you think about it, volunteer labor service sounds great. It is forced labor, but if you are trying to prove to the electorate that put you into power that you're going to be different from the Weimar Republic, if you can slap an unemployment rate that's much less than what was previously at, the headline that follows that is not going to say unemployment dropped due to forced labor.
No, it's not. And it's going to give people that aren't in the forced labor the perspective that you're fixing it and doing what you're saying.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you're planning on as the repayment plan, which again is taking land and everything. What was it?
Ribbon or Lebensraum.
Lebensraum, right? Living space. Kind of jumping over to France and everything, while they're gearing up to do all this stuff, a couple decades of this like industrial halt that France has had on their factories meant they couldn't produce or mass produce like modern aircraft or communications equipment. And because they got a late start on it when Germany invaded, French forces were just like drastically outpaced and under-equipped because they're going through this time frame where, again, everything's built on like the civilian economy, basically. And because Germany's doing this on the sly and manufacturing this stuff under the guise of like train parts and all this other stuff, putting people to work, no one really knows what's going on. They haven't come out yet.
They're just not ready.
No, they're not. And countries in Central and Eastern Europe like Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, they'd been just hollowed out by the Depression. They had no industrial base because they'd also been kind of traded and fought over and all this kind of stuff. They couldn't build modern weapons, and they couldn't afford to buy them, even from like Britain and France, who were insanely strapped for cash and would be willing to sell them. They just didn't have the money to do it, which in turns is what makes these countries very easy to overrun and to take over once Germany decides that that's the route they're going to go.
Well, and you have a bloodless absorption, a happy greeting into Austria.
I mean, yeah, by 1940, that was when Britain had stood alone against Germany. So, I mean, within just a couple years, it's just Britain and Europe. The strain of that fighting had completely emptied the British treasury. They were on the verge of a total financial bankruptcy until the U.S. stepped in with the Lend-Lease in 1941 to basically keep them in the fight and to supply them with what they were needing. That didn't single-handedly pull the U.S. out of the Great Depression, though. It just kind of served as this change of direction in which we could kind of start the ball rolling in the right direction. And that would allow us to kind of accelerate the transition to that full wartime production, which is what essentially did bring us out of it. But I mean, the act required billions of dollars worth of like military hardware, ships, aircraft, agricultural goods. So that was ramping up again. Factories that had been previously quiet back in the United States that had been making cars or fucking furniture or refrigerators were now repurposed to create machine or, trucks and planes and all that kind of stuff, and had to hire around the clock shifts. So you go from half capacity or that were shut down with 50% workforce to needing 150% workforce to be able to do this. So like you were saying, the U.S. employment, 1940 was about 14.6. By late 41, it was under 10. And then it dropped near zero as the war continued to progress. And as the U.S. government's pumping billions of dollars into private manufacturing to build new factories, new machinery, all of this kind of stuff, that kind of gets us on, that's what gets us on our feet.
Well, and what Ford went from producing, I think it was a Model A at that point maybe, to being full-blown into making Jeeps, into making planes.
And it wasn't just from a standpoint of war machinery and like transportation. They were buying everything, man. Like it was food, it was tobacco, it was clothing, any of that kind of stuff. Like anything that they would need over in Europe that just normal people needed over here, they were sending that kind of stuff over. That's why there was also rationing and things like that back home, because anything that they could send over there, they were trying to do that.
So much of the Germany plan was a little bit of a cloak and dagger, because along with hiding these unemployment statistics with forced manual labor, there's this thing called the New Plan that's established, and it's just basically introducing a control over all foreign trade and currency so they can try to achieve what they consider this national economic self-sufficiency. So you're contracting everything that's going on, any relations that are going on outside of the country are being handled by the government. Then in 1935, conscription's reintroduced. And that's a big no-no, because the Treaty of Versailles said you will not ever do that again. Also, if you're shifting this big massive shifting to a big massive military expansion, you're absorbing hundreds of thousands of workers into a military force. You're also folding in the SA, which at one point in time, I think they said the SA was 10 times the size of the standing German military, like prior to
because it was such a small standing military,
But if you do that, anybody else that's unemployed at that point now has these free jobs open up in these factories.
Yep.
And you're also reducing your population through prison camps, work camps, pushing Jews into ghettos, and kind of taking them off the board for really any sort of statistical analysis. By 1936, as you were talking about, with kind of all of these, you're training pilots in these private clubs, you're building U-boats in different pieces and everything like that. 36, they hit this 4-year plan, and it just shifts the economy into high gear for total war readiness.
At that point, that's kind of like them saying, we don't really need to hide it, but if someone asks about it, we're just going to be like, what? We're just making a few things.
And at that point in time, if we're ready enough to go in 4 years, they're not going to be, because as you were talking about, they had such minimal
They weren't ready
spending.
to go at that time. That's the whole thing. Like Germany still had a little bit of a head start even without anyone knowing. And at that point, it was just kind of like, they said they're just building it for, it was almost Germany looking, being like, so do something about it. And Britain was like, we will. I mean, don't make us. Slow down what you're doing. They're like, all right, we'll slow down. They're like, good. All right. We'll see in another 6 months.
Yeah. Britain goes back and they ask, what's our war readiness? And they say, 8 years, sir. And then all of a sudden they hear, Germany's got a 4-year plan.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Uh-huh.
And I think through most of it, because Czechoslovakia was very little fighting, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Poland was really the first kind of...
That's when the British got involved, because Poland and them had the agreement that it was the... What do you call that? The mutual, whatever it is, mutual protection or agreement or like that.
It becomes a situation where even though they have a 4-year plan, if the 4-year plan starts in 1936 and they're already into Poland and Czechoslovakia and Austria in 1939,
their 4-year plan is to be able to take France by 1940 is what it is.
Yeah, they had everything working in their favor as far as the timetables go because.
And they're able to do it because no one else can do anything because they're still recovering from the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
I guess to kind of go the other direction, positive things that might have come out of the Depression a little bit. This was when, this introduced the mass entry of women into the workforce during World War II. And this fundamentally revolutionizes the American economy. So like you said, in Germany, they're pulling able-bodied workers out of these factories to serve in the military. We're doing the same thing where we're pulling people out of factories, and we're going to be replacing them with this previously kind of untapped resource we have in the female workforce.
Rose of the Riveter, baby.
Exactly. So, represented there the conscription of over 16 million men for World War II. That leads to the 50% expansion of like the female labor force between 1940 and 1945. So women built 40% of America's military aircraft and made up over a third of the workforce in defense plants. And as weird as this sounds, we see the result of this very prominently in our society today. This lays the early groundwork for like the dual income family, which in turn, you're coming out of the war and you got 2 earners in the house and everything. That's like a wet dream for the economy of like increased spending, trying to avoid a recession or dipping back into like a depression or anything like that. And, even though women were still paid less at the time than men for the same work, their wages brought this massive influx of cash into American households and kind of transformed part of the country in the sense of people could buy more homes now. People bought more automobiles because guess what? Now you have 2 people going to work. You need 2 cars. So both of you can go. So it really does shift the way that pretty much the entirety of the American economy functioned.
You have the urban sprawl that is building more highways and building more road systems out to these communities that don't have to be linked to town. The advent of suburbs, almost a little bit.
Because you had factories that there was no room within these urban centers to build something of that size, so you had to build them out in rural centers away from the city. But then you had suburbs that had to spring up with all of the workers to actually work there.
Yeah, it's the way that the Great Depression gets solved by the war. The way
that it both causes and is. But think of it this way. It solved it for us. Did it solve it for any of the other countries?
Well, they were just back to Reconstruction after the war themselves. So.
And at that same time, we had so much money that they were just like, more money, please. And we're like, sure.
Uh-huh.
Because us lending a ton of money and doing all that kind of stuff didn't totally lead to the instability that led to this in the first place.
There was so much confidence after World War One that there wasn't going to be World War II.
It was still the same blind, stupid. I'm not saying we shouldn't have contributed because, yeah, our planes fucked up a lot of shit over there and everything. And you can't just slap Germany with the same type of shit because then it's going to be the same stuff all over again. So there had to be a different way. So what? You just cut it in half and then you cut a city in half and you just run it that way.
The confidence that you're not going to have a World War III has to already be sitting at an all-time low because you're over there while in the Soviet Union.
You had to pray that you came out of that economically in a much better spot than you went into it, because you're looking at the Soviet Union as the next enemy that's going to be across from you in the Cold War, and you're seeing what they accomplished during World War II, and it's like, okay, thank God, we're in this position now.
And maybe that's the impetus to invest so much in Europe, is to try to build back up that buffer zone between
I think that's a huge
you and
thing
the Soviet
too,
Union.
is to make sure that, yeah, because essentially that's whose problem it's going to be. When it comes on to, boots on the ground type scenario, you're hoping to just have to, again, like we've always done, send the support over and hope that it never actually comes knocking on our door.
You also had the new opportunities in Germany, because I think we talked about it kind of in prep. You have occupation in Germany. You have West Germany that you are building in the image of economically being capitalist.
Yeah.
You have West Berlin that you're kind of training to put this in an area where they can be a market that not only can you build up their industry, you're building up another trade partner that you're going to be able to send things over
You're
to.
inserting yourself in there to be a part of that trade as it grows, as it is. And at the same time, you're looking at it from a perspective of what failed the last time. We tried to let them. I almost feel like we tried to let you guys do it on your own the first time with the Treaty of Versailles. Yes, you guys did get fucked over with the amount that you had to do for the reparations and all that and how it was handled. But just fucking let us do it. And then you get in there and you build it kind of with yourself within the infrastructure, so you always have a measure of control. So there's definitely some like self-serving. Basically, if we're going to lend you the money, we need to have enough control of the situation to make sure you're in a position to pay us back.
And if we're taking a little off the top, is we're rebuilding you.
Yes.
That's just...
If we put a few more McDonald's in, West Germany and West Berlin, what about it?
We've set up a whole new foreign country that private industry from our country can
Just
go
got
ahead
to kind of rebuild, right?
intercede in there. Yeah, we can... The restaurants, you guys are going to have a Bloomingdale's in West Berlin.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to completely transform everything. Oh, and by the way, if you think that maybe you don't want the Allied powers in here rummaging around in your German business, go ahead and take a look to the
You
east.
have other options if
Yeah.
you'd like to go ahead and call your buddies over in East Germany and East Berlin. Yeah.
Turns
See how
out
they're doing over there.
nobody had built a wall yet, so just go ahead and stroll over there. See what's going on in their neck of the woods.
Yeah. But yeah, no idea that it was this far reaching. No idea it had this much of a cause on World War II. It's always just kind of framed as a bunch of stockbrokers lost their ass on this day, jumped out of some buildings, and people were sad for a little bit. It's like, no, this was a global spanning just clusterfuck that affected so many different people and was bookended by the two largest conflicts that have ever occurred. It was a shitty book, man.
Yeah. One of them got us into it. The other one got us out of it. And we just kind of have to look back at this period of time and think, what went wrong? What can we fix in the future? Didn't really fix a whole lot in the future because we still have recessions that have happened after this.
Mm-hmm. And there's still the same stuff that's happening to try to pull attention or try to go ahead and make people feel better about it. It's history repeats itself.
And you'd think that we would learn our lesson in speculation.
Oh, no, come on. That's asking too much.
You think that there wouldn't be other speculation markets that would crash and cause us to have all of these problems.
You would think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've touched on just a very few, what, I think 8 countries, maybe something like that. Mm-hmm. This involves so many other countries.
Countries that were smaller countries that were dependent on the larger countries that then by their failure, the larger countries' failure, the smaller countries just simply went down.
And that's the story of the Great Depression is, like we talked about in the first episode, the Depression didn't necessarily hurt the upper class and it didn't necessarily hurt the poor. It gave the poor more competition because it lowered the middle class into being in the same...
It created a much larger percentage of poor is what it did.
So that the impact on countries like Argentina and some of the countries in South America or some of the other countries, I guess pretty much all the countries were involved in Europe, but they were affected in different ways based upon international trade. If they were a growing country that were pushing into kind of stock market type situations or anything like that, they had to come out of this without being a part of the war.
Yeah, which was very difficult.
They had to find
if not impossible.
They had to find their own solutions. I do wonder if that's why so many other countries kind of helped join in, as far as not putting boots on the ground, but as far as like manufacturing or sending goods.
There's going to be an interesting section of history of countries that we do here coming up pretty soon. Because I know we want to do Spain, I know we want to do Portugal, but there's going to be a very interesting time frame during this 1939 to 45 period where we try to figure out like, hey, everything's on fire around you guys. Like, what the fuck are you guys doing during World War II when you're right in the middle of it? Or even talking about like Switzerland and things like that. It's going to be really interesting. But as far as the Depression goes, hopefully you guys learned something. If anything, was it during the first episode that I explained the soap operas?
Yeah.
That was? Okay. I don't know what you're going to remember out of this one.
I don't know.
I didn't have any fun little facts on this one.
Maple syrup reserves.
Okay, I like that
Canada.
one. Yes.
Yeah. Great Depression was only fueled by a lack of maple syrup in the United States.
Could have added it. It could have been a little bit sweeter. All right. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this 2-parter, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Peace.
Summer is here, which means we all want to look and feel our best. A GLP-1 may be right for you. Visit orderlymeds.com to learn more about which GLP-1 you could be eligible for. Getting started is fast, easy, and happens virtually through telemedicine from licensed professionals. Check it out for yourself. Go to orderlymeds.com/podcast. That's orderlymeds.com/podcast. Taking care of yourself feels great. Compounded medications are not FDA approved. Eligibility required and determined by a licensed provider. Individual results may vary. See website for details.